Tonight we drift east, where the Mekong moves like slow mercury beneath a patient moon. You stand at its edge, your feet sinking into the cool silt, and it's so quiet you can hear the frogs discussing philosophy. Fireflies bob over the water like confused lanterns. The river smells faintly of mud, smoke, and something sweetly ancient, perhaps the ghosts of pots long broken and forgotten. Somewhere upstream, a buffalo sighs. Downstream, the night widens, and you begin to sense that you're walking into a memory much older than your own. You probably won't survive this. Well, not in the historical sense. No one does. Civilizations rise, people vanish, but the clay remembers everything. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step along the muddy embankment where the moon's reflection shivers with every ripple. The Mekong, mother of the Khmer heartland, has been carving stories into its banks for centuries. Each flood leaves behind another thin layer of fertile earth, tiny offerings from mountains far away. And hidden in that earth is the secret that shaped kingdoms: clay. Soft, forgiving, and surprisingly ambitious. The locals say the clay here sleeps during the dry months. It hardens, cracks, curls up like an old man's hands. Then, when the rains come, it wakes, stretching, sighing, ready to be touched again. You crouch and press your palm to the wet ground. It's cool, slick, almost alive. Somewhere in that slickness is every pot ever made, every jar that carried rice wine, every bowl that caught rainwater from temple gutters. Above you, the sky is a smear of indigo and pale smoke from cooking fires. The river village ahead is barely visible, only a handful of bamboo houses balancing nervously on stilts. A dog barks once, decides you're not worth the energy, and curls back into sleep. You walk past quiet porches, past woven baskets stacked like lazy sentries. And there, behind one flickering doorway, you see her, a potter, her hair streaked with ashen moonlight, shaping a lump of clay by lamplight. Her hands move in slow circles, steady as prayer wheels. Historians still argue whether the earliest Khmer potters learned their craft from Indian traders or developed it alone from river necessity. But here, watching her, you suspect the answer doesn't matter. The river gave clay, the people gave patience, and between the two, a culture took form. You can almost hear it. Centuries ago, the gentle scrape of bamboo paddles against spinning wheels. No fancy metal turntables here, just a flat disc of wood, spun by a quick foot and a practiced rhythm. The pot takes shape as though the earth itself were learning to breathe. Nearby, an old man tends a fire pit where half-finished pots glow faintly red. He hums something between a song and a spell. The embers leap, eager for attention, and he taps one pot with a stick. The sound rings pure, like a bell made of dust. That's how they know it's ready, not by time or temperature, but by tone. Modern kilns have thermostats. These people have intuition and patience, which, let's be honest, you probably don't have when your Wi-Fi buffers. A toad hops across your path, its belly smeared with clay. You can't help wondering if even the animals here get involved in pottery. The air thickens with humidity, the kind that curls paper and makes your shirt cling like a needy friend. You keep walking, drawn by the quiet pulse of the river. It's said that long before Angkor's towers pierced the jungle, humble pots were already trading hands along these banks. Traders carried them by raft, balancing stacks taller than themselves. Archaeologists later found fragments in places far from the Mekong, some as far as the Gulf of Thailand. That means the pot you just watched being shaped might have cousins scattered across the sea, sleeping under coral and barnacle. You pause at the water's edge. The moon sits low now, dipping a toe into the current. Across the river, faint silhouettes of fishermen move, dragging nets that glitter like cobwebs. Somewhere in that black water, a crocodile tones lazily, unimpressed by human ambition. And you, for a fleeting moment, feel the same timeless patience that clay must feel before the potter's hands disturb it. A breeze passes, carrying with it the scent of tamarind smoke and riverweed. You close your eyes. Behind your eyelids, images bloom, spinning wheels, temple reliefs, red hands, broken pots gleaming in the sun. You realize that what you're standing on isn't just a riverbank, it's the very archive of a people who trusted mud more than marble. When you open your eyes again, the village has grown quieter. Even the dogs have surrendered. The only sound left is the river breathing in and out, like an old storyteller between lines. You feel it tugging at your ankles, urging you onward, deeper into its tale. Soon, you'll leave the moonlight and step into the clay itself, to feel its pulse, its warmth, its odd humor. For tonight, you're not just watching history, you're about to knead it between your fingers. The river curves ahead like a half-finished pot, and somewhere beyond that bend, the clay waits, sleeping, dreaming, and ready to remember. You wade out from the waterline, feeling the ground squelch beneath your heels. The riverbank gives way with a soft sigh, and suddenly your toes sink into something deeper, cooler, and alarmingly alive. This is the sleeping clay, the very marrow of Khmer soil. You kneel and scoop some up, the way a baker might test dough. It clings to your fingers, reluctant to let go, and when you finally pull free, it leaves delicate spirals behind, little fingerprints of time. It's strange, isn't it? You're standing on the same earth that once built empires, temples, bowls, and the occasional suspiciously lumpy teapot. The clay has watched everything: war, drought, coronations, love stories carved into lintels. And through it all, it stayed exactly what it is, quietly generous and unbothered. They say the best clay lies where the river bends, where silt settles after each monsoon. So you follow a narrow path along the bank to a place locals call the Sleeping Bend. There, a family is already at work under a makeshift shelter of palm fronds. Their bodies move slowly, rhythmically, as though keeping time with the river's breathing. The father digs deep with a wide wooden spade, his son kneads the clay beside him, and the mother sprinkles fine sand to temper it. You crouch beside them, half afraid to interrupt. The father glances up with a smile that says, "You're late by about 800 years. He gestures for you to try. You grab a small scoop and dig, immediately discovering that the clay doesn't want to cooperate. It clings, resists, mocks you with its stubborn heaviness. The boy laughs softly. You give him a look that says, "Fine, you win this round, mud child." As you knead, the air fills with the damp perfume of earth newly awakened. It's oddly soothing, like turning over pages of an old book. The texture changes beneath your hands, from gritty to silky, from cold to faintly warm. It's easy to see why ancient potters called it sleeping clay. It really does seem to stretch and yawn as you work it. Historians still argue whether the Khmer people began large-scale pottery before or after they mastered bronze casting. Some claim the two crafts evolved together, fire teaching them metal, and metal teaching them control of fire. But as your palms press into the river's flesh, you realize that clay doesn't need metallurgy to feel miraculous. It's already half alive. The mother points to a pile of finished lumps shaped like oversized bread loaves. Each one will rest for a week, covered in banana leaves to dream properly, she says. Apparently, clay needs nap time too. You nod solemnly, because after this much kneading, you'd like a nap yourself. Nearby, chickens scratch at discarded bits, as if testing the material for themselves. The family laughs when one of them slips and ends up wearing a clay glove on its foot. The boy rescues it, still giggling, and the chicken stalks away with deep offense. For a moment, everyone's laughter blends with the river's quiet chuckle. You look around and notice something. This isn't a craft village in the modern sense. There are no signs, no stalls, no tourists. Pottery here isn't an art form, it's survival. Water jars for dry months, cooking pots for long stews, urns to store rice against flood season. Functional beauty. You think of your own shelves cluttered with ceramic mugs that never quite match, and you wonder if any of them were ever made with this kind of devotion. One of the boys picks up a lump of unshaped clay and presses his thumb into it, creating a small hollow. He drops a seed inside. For luck, he says. You ask if it works. He shrugs. Maybe for the seed. The father joins in, showing you how to test the readiness of the clay. He rolls it into a long rope and loops it back on itself. If it cracks, it's too dry. If it droops, too wet. The perfect texture balances somewhere between obedience and rebellion, just like people, you think. A thin mist creeps across the river as evening approaches. Mosquitoes begin their nightly hunt, undeterred by the smoke spiraling from the cooking fires. Someone nearby pounds rice in a mortar, the rhythmic thud echoing through the trees like a distant drum. You stretch your aching fingers and realize how much work hides in every humble pot. A story drifts across the water from an elder perched on a low stool. Long ago, the first potter was a spirit who fell in love with the river. He shaped clay to keep pieces of her near him when she flooded and left. Every pot since, he says, is just the river remembering that love. It's poetic, but also oddly plausible, considering you're currently smeared head to toe in what feels suspiciously like romance. You help carry the day's harvest of clay back toward the village. The baskets are heavy, but the rhythm of walking over the wet path feels almost meditative. Each step squishes in perfect tempo. Fireflies hover around you like curious sparks. The father tells you that when the moon is full, the clay becomes moody. It bubbles strangely, resists shaping. Maybe it wants to be left alone, he says. Even the earth needs a night off. You glance at the shimmering moon above, full and heavy, and silently promise to be kinder to your next lump of moody clay. By the time you return, the air smells of boiling rice and roasted fish. A radio crackles somewhere, half drowned by the frogs. The family thanks you, laughing at your unevenly smeared face, and you realize you've left a bit of yourself in that pit of sleeping clay, sweat, skin, and maybe a trace of wonder. You sit by the river again, watching the mist roll low and silver. The piles of dug clay sit beneath palm leaves, dreaming quietly in their heaps. You think about the thousands of hands that have done this same thing for centuries, each motion echoing through time like ripples that never stop. When the first stars appear, you feel the pull to move again, to find where this clay will awaken next, to see what fire and fingers will do to it. The river hums softly, guiding you toward the distant glow of another village where wheels spin and kilns breathe. The story is stirring again. The next morning smells of smoke, rain-soaked wood, and a faint sweetness, like burnt sugar mixed with soil. You follow the trail of that scent, winding past palm trees and sleepy chickens, until the forest opens into a clearing glowing orange at its heart. There they are, the potters of Phnom Kulin, fingers of fire dancing through the mist. They are already at work before sunrise. Flames lick out from the mouths of their clay kilns, tall and uneven like sleeping beasts. You watch as a woman bends close to feed one with split bamboo, her face bathed in molten light. The air shimmers, alive with heat and the crackle of ancient patience. You edge closer, instantly regretting it. The wall of warmth smacks you like a sunburn wearing perfume. The potters barely notice. Their skin glistens with sweat, their hands move without hesitation, and their eyes seem half elsewhere, part here, part in some timeless rhythm that belongs only to them. They shape the pots directly on spinning wheels, made from smooth stone balanced on wood pegs. There's no whirring motor, no mechanical hum. Just the occasional grunt, the gentle splash of water, and the endless whisper of turning. You watch as a bowl rises from the earth like a thought becoming speech. One potter nods toward you, amused. "Try," she says. You do. Which is generous of her, because what you actually do is murder a perfectly innocent lump of clay. Your pot collapses in on itself, drooping like a sad flan. The potter chuckles softly, reaches over, and with a flick of her fingers coaxes the mess back into balance. "You use too much force," she says. "You think you're fighting it. You must dance." You try again, this time letting the clay tell you what it wants. It hums beneath your palms, cool and trembling, spinning faster than your confidence. The walls of the pot rise and tremble like wet skin. For a moment, it almost works. Then the wheel slows, and the pot slouches once more into tragic modern art. The potters clap anyway. Someone mutters that even the river gods had to start somewhere. Historians still argue whether the Phnom Kulen kilns date back to the pre-Angkorian period or later, during the rise of Jayavarman II, the king who declared himself a god on this very mountain. Archaeologists have dug up thousands of shards here: jars, urns, cooking pots, glazed roof tiles, and ceremonial vessels once used in temple offerings. What they haven't quite agreed on is whether these fires were royal workshops or communal ones. Either way, the evidence burns right in front of you, living, smoking proof that the tradition never really stopped. The potter beside you dips her fingers in a bucket of muddy slip and paints quick, sure lines onto a drying pot. Circles, vines, strange geometric loops that look suspiciously like doodles. She grins. "Decoration makes it remember who made it," she says. You ask what happens if someone forgets to mark their pot. She shrugs. Then it belongs to everyone. Behind her, rows of finished pots stand cooling, their surfaces glowing dull red. They look like an army of waiting spirits, breathless and half alive. The heat distorts everything, even the air seems to waver between worlds. Suddenly, the sky grumbles, a low, rolling thunder that makes a few chickens panic. The potters barely react. Rain is inevitable here, as regular as breath. They simply adjust, pulling woven mats over their tools and laughing as the first fat drops sizzle against the kiln mouths. The smell changes instantly: wet earth, with smoke, clay steam. It's intoxicating, and probably terrible for your lungs. You retreat under a palm awning where an older man squats with a bamboo pipe. His hands are scarred, his fingernails rimmed in red clay. He nods toward the kilns. "They breathe," he says. "You listen to them. Each one has a voice." He points to the nearest one, its fire glowing through cracks like eyes. "That one is hungry. That one, angry. That one is lazy. Like my son." He laughs, and you can't help joining. The flames surge, fed by more wood. You can feel the heat even through the rain. Sparks leap out like fireflies in rebellion. You watch a line of pots start to darken, their surfaces shifting from dull brown to deep, glimmering ochre. The transformation is slow, mesmerizing, like watching time itself make up its mind. A woman beside you tells a story passed down from her grandmother. Once, a potter fell asleep beside his kiln, and when he woke, one of the pots had spoken his name. It whispered that it had seen the inside of fire and found it beautiful. Ever since, potters here tap their vessels before removing them from the flame, just to make sure they are done talking. The rain eases, leaving the world dripping and new. Steam rises from every surface. The jungle hums softly as if applauding. You take a step closer to the kilns, watching as the potters begin to unload their work. Each vessel emerges with a soft clink, slightly imperfect, utterly human. Some crack in half, victims of uneven heat. Those are tossed aside without ceremony, no mourning, no waste. The fragments will be crushed, mixed back into future clay. Nothing truly dies here, it just changes shape. A young apprentice carefully lifts a perfect urn, wide-mouthed and smooth as river stone. He holds it up for inspection. The potter nods, approving. "That one," she says, "is strong enough for water and memory." You reach out, touching the urn's side. It's still warm, humming faintly from within. You imagine it cooling beside a temple someday, holding rainwater, perhaps a lotus, perhaps a wish. The potters gather to eat a late meal, sticky rice, grilled fish, and sour soup served in cracked bowls. They pass one to you without hesitation. You realize the bowl you're eating from might have been made here a week ago, or a century. The continuity is seamless, a quiet defiance of time. As the sky darkens to bruised violet, the last embers dim. The kilns sigh out trails of smoke, the fingers of fire withdrawing back into the mountain's heart. The potters stretch, laugh, and begin packing away their tools. You linger a moment longer, reluctant to leave the glow. When you finally turn away, your hands are streaked with ash, your hair smells faintly of smoke, and your heart feels oddly fired, hardened, glazed with wonder. You step into the night as the rain begins again, soft and rhythmic, tapping the cooling pots like a lullaby. By the time you reach the next village, the river has grown wide and lazy, dragging mats of floating hyacinth in slow circles like it's playing with its food. The sun burns white through a haze of wood smoke, and everywhere you look, hands are busy. Hands slapping clay, hands trimming rims, hands brushing away mosquitoes, hands that seem to remember 1,000 years of rhythm without ever being taught. This is the village of 10,000 hands, a place where pottery isn't just a trade, it's the local dialect. Even the breeze sounds like shaping. You walk through narrow lanes between stilted bamboo houses, each one a small factory of quiet creation. Grandmothers sit cross-legged with spinning wheels before them, gossiping about neighbors while their palms shape water jars the size of toddlers. Children roll marbles of leftover clay and pretend they're making royal urns. Even the temple cat, white with one brown ear, is dusted gray with powdery clay dust. The air hums with motion. Wheels whir. Sticks scrape. Someone sings an off-key lullaby that somehow fits perfectly into the rhythm. You pause by one family's yard, where a dozen small jars line up like recruits awaiting inspection. The father crouches to trim their bases with a bamboo knife, scraping thin curls that fall like dried leaves. His daughter watches him closely, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. You realize she's learning the craft not through lessons, but through osmosis. In this village, the art passes from palm to palm, like a secret handshake with time. The father glances up. "First we teach them to make small things," he says. "Jars, toys, little gods. If they can make something that holds water, they can make something that holds memory." You think about that. The idea that holding memory might be a skill, a craft that needs patience, balance, and the occasional kill accident. Historians still argue whether this form of communal pottery production emerged during the Anka Empire's height or long after its decline. Some say it was a village tradition co-opted by royal workshops. Others insist the royal workshops merely inspired the villages. Either way, the legacy is clear. In Cambodia, pottery has always been collective, never solitary. You keep walking. The lane opens to a wide clearing where rows of drying pots bask in the heat. They stretch as far as you can see, a terracotta sea. A young man walks among them, tapping each with a short stick, listening for tone. The dull ones go back for reworking, the clear ringers move on to the kill. The process looks like a musician tuning an orchestra of earth. You notice, too, the imperfections. Little bumps, tiny scars, uneven rims. No two pots are quite the same. In an age obsessed with factory precision, this village feels like a quiet rebellion, an insistence that beauty breathes only when it's slightly crooked. You step closer to one house, where an old woman with a cloud of white hair sits shaping a small pot. Her fingers move so delicately you almost expect the clay to purr. She doesn't look up as she says, "The river makes clay, but our hearts make shape." You're not sure if she's quoting someone or just casually dropping wisdom. Either way, you decide she's right. A rooster struts by, eyeing a wet pot like it's competition. The old woman flicks a bit of water at him. "You'd collapse in the kiln, you noisy fool," she mutters. You laugh, earning her a grin. Nearby, a young monk in saffron robes watches a group of children spinning toy bowls. He kneels to help, rolling his own lump of clay between palms too clean for the job. The children giggle when he accidentally flattens it into something resembling a sad pancake. "See?" he says, laughing. "Even monks need practice." You remember hearing somewhere that Buddhist monasteries often taught pottery to novices, not as punishment or art, but as meditation. The slow turning, the focus, the surrender to imperfection, it all fits. Maybe that's why the air here feels so calm. Every breath, every scrape, every drop of sweat seems folded into a larger rhythm. The afternoon grows hotter. The clay smell thickens, almost metallic. Someone ladles cool coconut water into a cup and hands it to you. The cup itself, of course, handmade, thin, fragile, perfectly imperfect. You sip and taste faint sweetness mixed with dust. It's oddly comforting. Beyond the houses, you notice something that makes you pause. Hundreds of small figurines, half buried along the path. Tiny elephants, dancers, gods, birds. Offerings. They are molded from leftover clay, left to crumble naturally back into the ground. It's recycling on a spiritual level. You crouch and pick one up, a bird mid-flight, its wings just barely intact. The details are rough but tender. When you set it back, you feel like you've returned a thought to the earth. A passing potter explains, "We make those for the river. When someone dies, we leave them here so their spirit remembers the feel of clay." He shrugs. Otherwise they forget who they were. That hits harder than expected. You look at your own hands, still faintly red from the last kill's heat, and wonder what your spirit would need to remember. Evening approaches, and the work slows. Women cover the drying pots with straw mats to protect them from dew. Children chase each other between rows, laughing until someone inevitably bumps into a jar and gets scolded. You sit on an upturned pot, feeling its cool surface against your palms. The whole village seems to exhale together, the day's energy softening into contentment. One of the older men lights a kerosene lamp, its glow turning the clay around you to honey-colored gold. "When I was young," he says, "we sold pots by boat. 2 days downriver to Phnom Penh. We traded for salt and dried fish. Hard work, but simple. Now, the traders bring plastic." He sighs. Plastic doesn't break, but it doesn't forgive either. You look around at the rows of handmade vessels, their surfaces breathing with small flaws. They may break, but they live first. Maybe that's the better bargain. The night deepens. The last sound you hear before sleep is a rhythmic tapping. Somewhere, someone's still shaping a pot by lantern light. 10,000 hands at rest, 10,000 dreams kneading slowly back into the river's heart. By dawn, you've drifted inland from the riverside, where mist clings to the trees like a secret unwilling to let go. The path narrows, the air thickens with the scent of damp leaves and incense, and then, like something rising out of a dream, you glimpse it, the outline of Angkor Wat, half veiled by morning fog. You pause, because honestly, how could you not? The towers loom like 5 colossal lotus buds carved from sunrise itself. You think you're ready for the sight, but no one ever really is. You move closer, through the maze of stones that once pulsed with ceremony, chatter, and the shuffle of bare feet carrying offerings. The sound is gone now, replaced by the hush of centuries. But if you listen, really listen, you can almost hear faint echoes beneath the surface, a low murmur of pots and plates, of clay vessels clinking in temple kitchens, of artisans shaping devotion into jars. They say beneath these temples, deep under the earth, lie layers of pottery, shards upon shards, broken evidence of the daily lives that once orbited these gods of stone. You crouch near a half-buried fragment, its glaze dulled by time but still catching the light like a sigh. You run your thumb across it, and for a moment it feels warm, as if it remembers being held. A breeze whispers through the gallery halls, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine and smoke. You step inside a corridor where bas-reliefs stretch endlessly, wars, dances, battles, and mythic beasts frozen mid-roar. But you're drawn instead to a small, almost unnoticed carving tucked near the edge, a woman turning a wheel, her hair bound with flowers, shaping a pot. Her face is serene, unhurried. A potter immortalized among gods and kings. Historians still argue whether temple artisans were honored professionals or anonymous laborers, buried beneath their own handiwork. The truth probably lies somewhere between, essential, yet invisible. The empire needed pots more than poetry, but poetry is what remains. You imagine those temple kitchens alive with clatter, the bubbling of stews, the splash of coconut milk into earthen jars, the hiss of hot oil. Every meal, every ritual, every libation poured at dawn began in clay. Even the offerings to Vishnu and Shiva had to be held by something humble first. You grin at the irony. Divinity depends on dishes that crack if you breathe on them wrong. A monk approaches silently, barefoot and orange-robed, sweeping dust from the stones. His broom whispers over the ground like soft rain. You greet him, and he nods with a smile. You ask whether he ever thinks about the people who made the things buried beneath the temple. He pauses, thinking. When we sweep, he says, we also wake the past. You follow him toward a shaded corner where a few restored artifacts sit on display: water jars, incense burners, fragments of ceremonial plates, all unearthed nearby. One is shaped like a lotus bud, the petals so delicately etched that you can't help but marvel. It's easy to forget these came from river clay, shaped by human hands that probably worried about dinner and weather like anyone else. He gestures toward a cracked pot, its surface faintly blackened by fire. This one was found near the eastern Gapura, he says. They think it held ghee for lamps. He leans closer. But maybe it held stories instead. Sometimes, I think every pot is a small temple. That line lodges in your head. A small temple. You glance around, the sandstone towers, the carvings, the silent galleries, and realize he's right. Every vessel, every bowl made from this earth was a shrine to usefulness, to endurance, to care. You step back into the sunlight. Tourists begin to drift in now, cameras clicking like mechanical cicadas. You watch them move through the ruins, searching for grandeur. None of them notice the small clay shards embedded in the soil underfoot, tiny fossils of everyday life, glinting like shy witnesses. You're tempted to tell them, look down. The gods ate from these. But you let the thought fade. Some secrets are gentler when left sleeping. In the distance, workmen are restoring a section of collapsed wall. You walk closer, curious, and notice that their tools, though modern, echo the same shapes carved in the ancient reliefs. Wooden paddles, flat knives, simple chisels. The continuity hits you again. The same gestures repeated over centuries, the same hands guided by the same instincts. The difference is only the dust. You kneel beside a pile of rubble, pick up a small shard, and hold it to the light. Its surface still bears a faint pattern, a swirl like water. The same motif you saw on pots at the riverside. The design of motion, of flow. It's as if the river itself signed its name here. Somewhere behind you, a guide tells his group a story, that during the height of Angkor, potters supplied entire cities with thousands of jars and basins each year. Whole boatloads of pottery traveled the canals linking temple and village, market and palace. You picture that, a network of floating kilns, water glinting, pots stacked like honeycombs. Commerce and spirituality paddling side by side. A child from the tour group picks up a shard near your feet. "Treasure?" she asks. Her father shakes his head, distracted by his phone. You smile and say softly, "More like memory." She grins, tucks it into her pocket, and runs off. You pretend not to see. Maybe some things deserve to be carried away again. As the sun climbs higher, the stone warms beneath your bare soles. You walk through the main causeway toward the river that once fed the temple moats. The water glints green and sleepy, reflecting towers and clouds. You scoop a handful and let it slip between your fingers. It feels the same as the clay at the banks miles away. Perhaps it is the same. The river that built gods also built cups, and both have weathered centuries the same way, by enduring, quietly. Somewhere beneath your feet, pots still lie buried, their edges dulled, their silence unbroken. But you can almost hear them if you listen long enough. The soft clink of history not quite done speaking. You turn back once, the temple framed by sunlight and shadow. The towers rise above the jungle like great, calm guardians, and for a fleeting second, you think you see the potter from the relief smiling at you, hands forever turning, forever shaping. Then the wind stirs, the image shifts, and all that remains is dust, sunlight, and the whisper of clay remembering fire. You leave the temple stones behind and follow the smell of smoke. It's a rich, mineral tang that grows stronger as the trees thin out, until you find yourself standing before what looks, at first glance, like a sleeping dragon. A long mound of earth rises from the ground, its spine rippling with brick domes and narrow vents that breathe steady ribbons of white smoke into the sky. The dragon's mouth is open, an arched tunnel glowing red inside. This is a kill. A living, breathing creature of heat and patience. You step closer, feeling the temperature climb with each pace. The ground beneath your feet is warm, vibrating faintly with the breath of fire. Potters move around the structure like keepers tending a sacred beast. They carry baskets of fuel, split logs, bamboo, even dried coconut husks, and feed them into the glowing mouth. The kill hums in return, a sound that's half sigh, half growl. One of the men glances at you and grins, sweat streaking his face. "Careful," he says. "The dragon doesn't like fear." You laugh nervously, pretending not to take him seriously, though the kill's glow does seem faintly alive, like eyes half opening in the dark. You crouch at a safe distance as he tosses another log into the fire, sparks leaping upward in a sudden golden frenzy. This, he tells you, is an Annam-style kill, a design borrowed and adapted centuries ago from neighboring lands. Historians still argue whether the technique arrived with traders from Vietnam or Chinese artisans traveling along the Mekong. But the Khmer potters made it their own, stretching the design into long, snake-like forms to match the slope of the land, perfect for mass-firing jars, tiles, and statues. You peer through a vent hole and glimpse rows of pots stacked inside like sleeping monks. Some are already glowing a faint cherry red. The heat rushes out, washing your face with breath so hot it feels like sunlight solidified. The man beside you wipes his brow and says, "We fired for 3 days and 3 nights. No sleep. The kill must not stop breathing." 3 days. You imagine keeping a fire alive that long, through rain and exhaustion, without modern tools or timers, just intuition, and maybe a few burned eyebrows. You mention that to him. He chuckles. Burn eyebrows, burn arms, burn love. But if the flame dies, the pots die too. Nearby, a group of women work in the shade, preparing the glaze, a strange, thick mixture of ash, rice husk, and something greenish you can't identify. One of them dips a finger in and tastes it. You blink. She shrugs. Too much lime, she says, as casually as if she were testing soup. Apparently, even fire needs seasoning. You sit and watch as the sun slides toward afternoon. The air ripples with heat, bending the trees into ghostly shapes. The potters rotate in shifts, taking turns at the fire mouth, stoking, adjusting, listening. Every so often, one of them presses an ear to the brick wall as if hearing the kill's dreams. It's talking, one mutters. You ask what it's saying. It says, wait. You love that, how the act of waiting becomes a skill here. Not idleness, but alert stillness. Like meditation with sit under your nails. A boy walks by carrying a clay whistle shaped like a fish. He blows into it softly, and it trills a watery tune that somehow fits the crackle of the kill. He grins at you and says, "The kill likes music." You blow it too, earning a smirk from one of the older men. "Careful," he warns. "If you play badly, it cracks the pots." You're not sure whether he's joking. You decide to retire the instrument before causing a national disaster. By twilight, the fire is furious. The interior of the dragon glows like molten amber, and waves of heat distort the faces of everyone nearby. The potter's shadows twist across the ground, merging with smoke, so it's impossible to tell where humans end and fire begins. Someone pours water into a bamboo tube. Steam hisses out in angry bursts. It's both terrifying and beautiful, alchemy performed without arrogance. Historians believe these great kilns once supplied Angkor's massive demand for pottery. Water jars for workers, ritual vessels for priests, decorative tiles for palaces. Yet few of the kilns themselves have survived. Most collapsed, buried under vines or swallowed by later floods. The ones that remain, like this one, are both relic and rebirth, fired again and again across centuries, outlasting the names of those who built them. As the night deepens, the potters gather around the kill's mouth, their faces lit from below like campfire ghosts. One hums a low chant, joined by others, a rhythmless, wordless song that seems to match the pulse of the flames. The sound rises and falls with the crackling, until even the jungle quiets, listening. You feel something shift inside you, a recognition that this isn't just work, it's communion. Fire, clay, breath, and we're all negotiating a fragile truce. The potter's chant grows softer, dissolving into murmurs. Someone passes you a gourd of rice wine. It's smoky, sweet, and far too strong for a bedtime story, but you drink anyway. The warmth spreads instantly, blurring the edges of everything. When the fire finally steadies into a steady golden thrum, the master potter nods. "Now," he says, "we sleep in turns." He gestures toward a mat beside the kill, and before you can protest, someone tosses you a woven blanket that smells faintly of clay and smoke. You lie down, watching the orange light flicker across the underside of the palm roof. The dragon breathes beside you. Inhale, exhale, glow, fade, glow again. You think of the river, the temples, the 10,000 hands, and how all of it keeps leading back to this one element, fire. The only thing that can turn soft mud into permanence, that can make something both fragile and eternal. As you drift toward sleep, you catch yourself smiling. You've started to understand the strange faith of these potters. The belief that destruction and creation are simply two temperatures of the same flame. And somewhere in the background, the dragon breathes on, steady and eternal, keeping its promise to the clay. When dawn comes, it does so quietly, no grand fanfare, just a gentle bleeding of light through the smoke. The kill still exhales thin white ribbons, but the fierce red glow has softened to a sleepy pulse. You wake to the sound of someone stirring ashes with a bamboo pole, testing the dragon's heartbeat. The air smells of damp clay, smoke, and something sweetly roasted, like rice husks caught halfway between life and ash. The potters rise one by one, stretching sore backs and blinking through the haze. A rooster crows somewhere, late to the party, but still proud of the effort. You rub your eyes and realize that even after 3 days of feeding flames, they look serene. That's what practice does. It smooths the soul like a river smooths stone. Breakfast is simple: sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, dipped in palm sugar, and eaten with clay-stained fingers. You try to look grateful while discreetly removing a bit of soot from your lips. Someone laughs. "The river gives us clay," one woman says, "but it also gives us dirt in our food." You both laugh, and she shrugs. Balance. When the kill's walls are finally cool enough to touch, the master potter gestures for everyone to gather. The great unveiling begins. One by one, bricks are pried loose, revealing the treasure inside. A wave of warm air escapes, carrying that unmistakable scent: new pottery, still humming with trapped heat. You lean closer. The pots shimmer faintly, their surfaces glazed in pale browns and greens, the kind of hues only nature invents by accident. One is speckled like quail eggs, another has a run of melted ash frozen mid-drip. The imperfections are perfect, tiny accidents that make each piece breathe differently. Someone holds up a large jar, sunlight flashing off its curve. "It's sang," she says proudly. You tap it lightly. It rings like a low bell, clear and steady. A perfect burn. A few others emerge cracked or warped, their sides blistered from uneven heat. No one complains. Instead, they are placed gently aside, as though they simply chose another destiny. "Those become offerings," says the master. "Broken ones keep the spirits humble." Historians still argue whether these firing rituals were purely practical or deeply spiritual. Some claim every kill had a guardian spirit, part ancestor, part flame deity, who demanded respect before work began. Archaeological digs near Kampong Chnang have even unearthed small clay figurines buried beside old kilns, perhaps tokens of protection. The potters here don't argue the point, they just smile and say, "The fire listens." You watch them clean each pot, rubbing away soot with smooth river pebbles until the surfaces glow faintly in the morning light. Children run back and forth carrying smaller pieces, chattering about whose pot will hold palm wine first. There's joy here, a humble, everyday celebration that turns labor into rhythm. A young apprentice approaches you, holding a jar no taller than your knee. "For you," he says shyly. It's crooked, one side slightly collapsed. You start to refuse, but he shakes his head. "Even ugly pots hold water." You take it, running your fingers along the uneven rim. It's still warm, almost alive. You wonder how long it will keep its heartbeat. Later, the master invites you to the riverside. He's placing several finished pots in a small canoe, stacking them carefully between bundles of straw. You offer to help, and he grins. "Good. The river likes new hands." The two of you push the canoe into the current. The water laps softly against the hull, a wet applause. As the canoe drifts, you notice how naturally the pots fit in this setting. Brown against brown, earth meeting water. It feels right, inevitable. "We send some downstream," the master explains. "To trade, yes, but also to let them travel. Pots must move, otherwise, they dream too much." You nod as if that makes perfect sense, though you're not entirely sure it doesn't. The current takes you around a bend where water hyacinths drift lazily, their purple flowers bright against the muddy green. You spot a heron standing on one leg, watching you with faint judgment. "He's seen more pots than emperors," the master says. You believe him. You stop at a floating market, a loose cluster of boats, each stacked high with goods, fruit, fish, textiles, and, of course, pottery. Women in broad hats bargain cheerfully, their laughter cutting through the humid air like wind chimes. You help unload the jars, feeling strangely proud even though you made none of them. One merchant lifts a pot, knocks it gently, and nods approvingly. The sound, that sound, echoes down the river, crisp as a temple bell. You can almost trace the ancient rhythm of trade in the way these pots change hands. Before coin, before paper, before borders, there was exchange, rice for jars, clay for salt, water for stories. Every fingerprint baked into those vessels carries a history of someone's hunger, hope, or heartbreak. A pot cracks as it's set down too roughly. The woman who dropped it winces. Without hesitation, she scoops the shards into her boat. "Don't waste," she says. "Broken pieces make good clay roads." You realize, with quiet admiration, that nothing here truly dies. It just changes form, like water becoming mist or laughter fading into echo. As the sun climbs higher, the market begins to blur in heat shimmer. The master potter squints toward the opposite bank where distant smoke rises. "Another kill starting," he says softly, half to himself. You follow his gaze, realizing that what you've seen here isn't a single event. It's a pulse that beats across the entire river basin. You sit for a while, legs dangling over the side of the boat, letting the river cool your feet. The current hums against the wood, a song older than dynasties. The master hums along. You don't recognize the tune, but somehow, you already know it. "Every time we open a kiln," he says, "we let go of something." "What do you mean?" He smiles. "The clay remembers the hands that shaped it. The fire remembers the breath that fed it. We don't own the pot when it's done, we just borrowed a little oath and time." You let that settle in the air between you. The river murmurs its agreement. Somewhere behind you, the dragon kill exhales one last curl of smoke, its long vigil complete. And as you drift downstream, your hands resting on that crooked little jar, you begin to feel it. The weight of the world reduced to something simple, something human. Touch, patience, and a little bit of mud that refused to stay still. By the time the sun begins to drop again, painting the river bronze and gold, you've left the bustle of the floating market behind. The water grows quieter, the air thicker, and the trees along the bank lean close, whispering gossip through their roots. Your small boat glides into a stretch where the Mekong slows to a thoughtful crawl, like it's remembering something it forgot to tell you. The master potter sits cross-legged at the bow, humming under his breath. The rhythm of his song matches the dip of your paddle. Each stroke feels older than you, older than kingdoms. He turns slightly, eyes still on the water. "You know," he says, "the clay we use here isn't just from the river. Sometimes it comes from the rice fields too, where the earth sleeps under the same rain but dreams different dreams." You ask what he means. He scoops a handful of wet mud from the side of the boat and lets it run through his fingers. "River clay moves," he says. "It remembers motion. Field clay stays. It remembers patience. Mix them, and you get both strength and grace." Historians still argue whether the ancient Khmer really distinguished between different clays or whether that's a later romantic idea. But watching him handle the earth like it's alive, you can't help believing him. Science might talk about mineral content and sediment ratios, but to him, and to you, now, it's a conversation between elements. You stop at a small landing, a cluster of stilted houses crouched over the water like patient birds. The villagers here are quieter, their smiles softer. They live between flood and drought, adapting as easily as the clay beneath them. The potter leads you to a narrow shed where women sit at low wheels, their bare feet turning pedals in slow circles. The wheels hum softly, a meditative drone under the chatter of frogs outside. One woman gestures for you to sit beside her. She's shaping a small offering bowl, her thumbs pressing gently into the spinning clay. You try to imitate her, but the lump on your wheel quickly turns into something that looks like a lopsided muffin. She laughs, wiping her hands on a cloth. Ah, first time? You nod sheepishly. She leans over, guiding your hands. Her fingers are firm but kind, steadying the trembling mess you've made. Don't fight it, she murmurs. Just listen. Clay already knows what it wants. You ease your grip, and suddenly it happens. The resistance softens, the shape steadies, and for one miraculous second, the earth cooperates. A bowl begins to form. A very ugly bowl, but a bowl nonetheless. Good, she says, nodding approvingly. It's almost round. Almost is doing heavy lifting here, but you beam anyway. A child runs past, chasing a chicken that's stolen a lump of clay in its beak. The woman sighs. We lose more clay to chickens than to bad weather, she mutters. You laugh, and she grins. Maybe they're trying to make pots too. Outside, a few older men are repairing a cracked water jar by coating it with fresh slip, a thin mixture of clay and ash. You ask if it will hold. One of them shrugs. Maybe. Maybe not. But even if it leaks, it still teaches. You sense he's not just talking about pots. Nearby, under a palm leaf awning, two boys are experimenting with tiny clay figurines, elephants, dancers, little monks with exaggerated smiles. One of them sticks a piece of straw in the figure's head, blows through it, and it whistles. We sell them at festival, he says proudly. The sound is sharp, cheerful, impossibly human. You can't help but whistle back. Later, the master potter brings you to a spot behind the houses where shallow pits mark where clay has been dug. Some pits are full of rainwater, their surfaces dotted with floating leaves. The mud at the bottom gleams like polished chocolate. We never take too much, he says, lowering his voice. The clay rests after work, just like we do. You crouch and touch the surface, warm, almost silky. Dragonflies hover above, each wing beat slicing the sunlight into fragments. The stillness feels sacred. You understand, suddenly, why potters here speak of clay with reverence, not ownership. As dusk deepens, the village gathers near the water for evening offerings. Small bowls, perhaps 100 of them, are lit with oil and floated downstream. The flames wobble on the surface like stars gone wandering. You stand among them, your hands still stained from the wheel, feeling the same quiet peace that comes after a job well done, or maybe after being gently humbled by mud. A monk in faded saffron robes steps forward and murmurs a prayer. You catch only fragments: oath, water, breath, return. His voice blends with the sound of frogs and oars, becoming part of the night's texture. You remember your crooked little pot, now resting in the canoe, and for a moment, it doesn't seem ugly at all. It's a fragment of a much larger conversation, the river speaking through you, through hands and heat and patience. Historians say these rural villages kept pottery alive long after royal patronage faded. When empires crumbled, when wars passed, when roads turned to dust, the potters stayed. Because someone had to keep feeding the dragon, someone had to keep the river's memory from drying out. You look out over the floating lights, the reflection of fire rippling through the water's skin, and you wonder how many of these people's ancestors watched the same scene centuries ago. Different boats, same glow, same quiet gratitude. Tomorrow, the master says, we take the jars to the festival. You raise an eyebrow. Festival. He smiles, eyes gleaming in the firelight. Every year we thank the river. We give her pots, she gives us patience. You laugh softly. Seems like a fair trade. He nods. It always is, if you don't rush. And as the last of the floating lamps drifts away, swallowed by distance and the patient hum of crickets, you realize he's right. Everything the river touches learns to slow down. Even you. The festival begins long before sunrise, while the sky is still bruised with leftover night, and mist curls low over the water like lazy smoke. The village hums with quiet purpose. You wake to the thud of wooden pestles pounding rice, the hiss of kettles, the occasional boast of laughter that cuts through the fog like a rooster's ego. By the time you step outside, the world smells of sweet coconut, fish sauce, and wet clay. The potters are already lining up their wares along the narrow bamboo jetty, rows of jars, bowls, and figurines catching the first pale light. It's not a marketplace today, it's more like a gallery curated by the river itself. The master potter waves you over, his smile tired but bright. "You carry this one," he says, handing you a medium jar painted with faint spiral motifs. The surface is rough beneath your palms, still whispering the heat of its recent birth. You hold it carefully, as though it might sigh if you squeeze too hard. Down by the shore, boats are being loaded, each one draped with woven palm leaves, flowers, and incense bundles. The air grows heavy with the scent of jasmine and smoke. "Every pot must travel once," the master says, his voice half chant, half explanation. "It's our way of letting the river know we're still listening." As you help lift jars onto the boats, you notice one vessel that stands out. It's large, so large that 2 men are needed to move it. The sides are carved with a serpent curling from base to rim. "In Jade pot," someone whispers. She carries the prayer for rain. Historians still argue whether these festival rituals date back to Angkorian water ceremonies or are later folk inventions. Some claim they evolved from royal rites honoring the river as a divine mother. Others think they are simpler village customs that persisted through centuries of empire and colonization. But standing here, watching a grandmother trace incense smoke over the serpent jar, you suspect it's both, royalty forgotten, devotion remembered. The first drumbeat breaks through the mist, low, deliberate, like a heartbeat too big for one chest. Then another joins it, then another, until the whole village seems to vibrate with rhythm. Children shout, dogs bark, birds scatter in irritation. The boats begin to push off one by one, each carrying its fragile cargo of clay and flowers. You climb aboard the master's boat. It rocks slightly under your weight, the water slapping its sides like applause. The rowers dip their paddles, and slowly, the line of boats drifts into the open river. From the banks, the villagers chant softly, a rise and fall of sound that blends with the river's murmur. You can't catch the words, but the cadence feels like breathing. Inhale, exhale, float, release. The master hands you a small pot, newly fired, its surface still unglazed. "Make a wish," he says. You hesitate. "Does it matter what I wish for?" He grins. "If it's honest, the river will translate." You think for a moment, then set the pot gently on the water. It drifts beside the others, wobbling slightly before finding its balance. For a moment, the reflection of the sun catches on its rim, turning it into a floating ember. Then it's gone, carried away like all the rest. The drums quicken. On shore, dancers begin to move, bare feet thudding against the packed earth, arms curved like waves. Their costumes shimmer with bits of mirror, catching the light and throwing it back across the water. It's both joyous and somber, a ritual of gratitude and surrender. You watch as one young woman, her wrists wrapped in red cloth, steps forward holding a bowl of water. She pours it slowly into the river, eyes closed. The surface ripples, swallowing the offering with a soft gulp. For the ones who came before, the master murmurs beside you. And for the ones still learning how to listen. A breeze rises, lifting strands of incense smoke into long, ghostly threads. The boats drift farther downstream, their cargo of pots bobbing gently in the current. Some tip and sink, leaving trails of bubbles. Others float on, proud and defiant. They choose, says the master. Some want to stay below. Some want to travel. You laugh softly. Like people. He smiles. Exactly. Historians might never agree on when or why the Potters' Festival began, but every gesture here feels ancient. The rhythm of the drums, the glint of fire on water, the soft clatter of pots colliding gently as they float away. Even the mistakes, the cracked jars, the uneven glaze, seem part of the design. At the far end of the procession, a young boy lets out a yelp. His pot has sunk faster than expected. He looks crushed, on the verge of tears. The master calls out to him, voice kind but firm, "Don't be sad. The river just liked yours too much." The crowd laughs, and the boy's face brightens instantly. As the sun climbs higher, the mist burns off completely, revealing the full spread of the festival. From above, it must look like a constellation drifting across brown water, tiny orbs of light and color moving with purpose. Somewhere nearby, a gong rings 3 times, signaling the end of the ritual. Boats begin to turn back. The current carries broken pieces and floating flowers toward the delta, toward the unseen sea. The villagers smile, tired but content. The year's thanks have been given, the debt to the river repaid. As your boat glides home, you look at your hands, still streaked with gray from handling clay, and realize how much they've learned without words. The river has taught you what books couldn't, how to hold something gently enough that it might stay, but loosely enough that it might go. Back on the shore, children splash in the shallows, chasing after the last few floating pots. You sit with the master as he sips rice wine, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You see," he says, almost to himself, "the potter doesn't just shape clay. The clay shapes the potter too." And you nod, because by now, the river has shaped you a little as well, softened your edges, slowed your thoughts, taught you to wait for the heat to cool before reaching for the fire again. The festival leaves a kind of quiet behind, one that hums faintly, like a bell still vibrating after being struck. The next morning, the river looks tired but content. Bits of flour and ash drift lazily on its surface, catching the first rays of sunlight like confetti from some cosmic parade. You wake to the familiar sounds of pots clinking, roosters clearing their throats, and someone laughing far too early in the day. The master potter is already awake, perched on a bamboo stool with a bowl of porridge balanced on his knee. "The river has eaten well," he says, smiling. "Now it lets us rest." But of course, rest is relative. The moment the sun clears the tree line, the village begins to move again, repairing, reshaping, preparing for whatever the next current brings. You find yourself drawn back to the workshop, where a few women are grinding clay with pestles, rhythmically, patiently. The sound is hypnotic, a slow, thudding heartbeat of work. You sit beside them, watching the clay turn from lumpy gray into something smooth and obedient. "This is how we remember," one woman says, without looking up. "Each time we grind, we hear our mother's songs." She begins humming softly, and soon another voice joins hers, then another, until the whole room vibrates with a tune that's less melody and more shared memory. Historians still argue whether pottery villages like this survived through skill or through sheer stubbornness. But sitting here, surrounded by voices and clay dust, you realize the answer doesn't matter. What kept them alive wasn't economics or politics, it was rhythm. The rhythm of hands repeating the same motion, generation after generation, until it became its own language. The master joins you later with a piece of parchment, an old, brittle map showing clusters of pottery sites across the Khmer heartlands. "These marks," he says, pointing, "were all river towns once. Some gone now, flooded, forgotten. But their shards still wash up after the rains. He chuckles. The past refuses to stay buried. He folds the map carefully, tucking it back into a bamboo tube. You want to see one? You nod before you can think better of it. And so begins another journey. You walk for hours through overgrown trails, where vines hang like green curtains and insects perform a kind of unending concert. The air smells of earth and rain, and every step squelches slightly. Used to be a road, the master says, smiling wistfully. Now it's just memory with roots. Eventually, you reach a clearing where the land dips toward a half-buried mound. From a distance, it looks like a collapsed termite hill. Up close, you see the outline of old bricks, warped and fused together by centuries of heat and rain. Shards of pottery poke through the dirt like fossils of small moons. This was a kiln, the master says softly. Maybe 500 years old. Maybe more. You crouch, brushing soil from one shard. It's thicker than modern pottery, and the glaze, though dulled, is still faintly green. A relic from a forgotten fire. You turn it in your hand, half expecting it to hum like the living dragonkill did. But it only sits quietly, the last echo of a song you can't quite hear. The master kneels beside you. They say, when a kill dies, the spirit sleeps beneath it. Not gone. Just dreaming. You ask if anyone still fires here. He shakes his head. Too far from the river. Without water, the clay hardens too soon. Without current, no patience. He gestures toward a patch of weeds, where a narrow channel once flowed. This used to be the river's hand, he says. When it changed course, the potters left. You close your eyes for a moment, trying to imagine it as it once was. The roar of fire, the chatter of workers, the sharp scent of burning bamboo. Now there's only silence and the hum of cicadas. And yet, the place doesn't feel dead. Just paused. You pick up a few small shards, turning them over in your palm. Some are curved like the belly of a bowl, others jagged, their edges sharp as truth. The master watches you. Keep one, he says, for remembering. But not too many. The earth doesn't like to be robbed of its stories. You slip one into your pocket, its weight oddly comforting. It feels like holding a heartbeat from another century. As you begin the walk back, he tells you stories of other kill ruins, some found in jungles, some beneath rice fields, one even beneath a modern school. Children were playing football, he says with a grin. Then the ground broke open, and the past shouted hello. He pauses. Funny thing about clay, it refuses to stay gone. It hides, but never disappears. Like old arguments between kings and rivers. You laugh. Historians still argue about those two. He nods. Yes, and the clay listens to all sides. By the time you return to the village, the sun is low again, washing everything in amber. The smoke from evening fires rises in slow columns, curling into clouds shaped suspiciously like sleeping dragons. You sit by the water's edge, tired but content, watching villagers bathe their feet in the shallows. The master sits beside you, quiet for a long time. Finally, he says, the river always reclaims what we forget. Pots, shards, even people. Maybe that's why we make them, to give the river something to remember us by. You look out across the broad expanse of brown and gold, and you realize he's right. Every broken pot that sank, every kill that cooled, every story lost to flood or time, they all ended up here, folded back into the same patient current. And for the first time, you begin to think of history not as a timeline, but as sediment, layer upon layer of soft memories, settling, waiting to be reshaped. By morning, the river smells faintly of clay again. You can't tell whether it's imagination or the truth seeping up through silt and memory. A group of children are skipping stones where the current slows, their laughter cutting through the fog like tiny bells. You follow the sound to a wooden jetty, where an unfamiliar boat has just moored, a narrow craft with peeling blue paint and cargo covered in woven mats. Out steps a man in a wide hat, carrying a ledger thick enough to be suspicious. His accent is foreign, his smile diplomatic. He bows slightly to the villagers, who return polite nods tinged with caution. "He's from the city," the master murmurs beside you. "Come to study. Or buy. Depends who you ask." It's not the first time outsiders have wandered upriver. They always come chasing something: beauty, history, or profit, depending on how kindly you phrase it. You trail behind as the stranger begins his inspection, peering at finished jars stacked under palm thatch roofs. His camera clicks like a locust. He asks questions in clipped Khmer, his assistant translating poorly. "How old this technique? Can I buy kill piece? Maybe make exhibition?" The potters answer softly, amused and wary. They've seen this dance before. He scribbles notes, measuring with his eyes as if ancient craftsmanship could be fitted neatly into a spreadsheet. Still, curiosity wins over pride, and soon you're helping the foreigner lift an old water jar, its glaze cracked but luminous. "You see," he says, "same method as Angkorian ware. Remarkable continuity." He looks genuinely delighted. For a moment, his excitement softens the edge of appropriation. You can tell he loves what he studies, but perhaps loves the studying a little more than the thing itself. Historians still argue whether such encounters preserved Khmer pottery or plundered it. Some say foreign collectors saved priceless techniques by documenting them. Others claim their curiosity drained the life from living crafts, turning workshops into exhibits. The truth, as always, sinks somewhere in the muddy middle. Later that day, the man and his assistant are invited for tea. The master potter pours from a handmade teapot, the spout uneven but graceful. The foreigner turns it in his hands like treasure. "You could sell these in Paris," he says. "Maybe Tokyo. People would pay much." The master smiles. "Then they can come here and buy. I do not ship dreams." It's the gentlest refusal you've ever heard. You sit through the conversation, half listening, half drifting. The soft clink of porcelain, the scent of tamarind tea, the rhythmic buzz of cicadas. These details feel more eternal than any museum label. You imagine shelves of Khmer pottery under cold lights abroad, tagged with numbers, admired in silence. They'd be safe there, perhaps, but not alive. The visitor leaves before dusk, promising to return with funding. The villagers wave, polite again, then burst into quiet laughter as soon as the boat drifts away. "They always want to help," one woman says, smirking. "But first they must own the helping." That night, the moon rises late, bruised by clouds. You walk along the embankment, hearing distant thunder. The air smells metallic, change brewing somewhere far away. In the flicker of lightning, the village looks ancient again, stripped of all modern pretense. The pots glint dully, lined up like silent witnesses. A soft splash draws your gaze. Down by the shallows, two boys are rinsing clay tools. One hums a tune, oddly familiar. It's the same melody the grinding women sang days ago, though slower now, dreamier. You realize, with a kind of awe, that this is how culture survives, not in archives or exhibitions, but in small repetitions no one bothers to write down. You think of the foreigner's excitement, his hunger to preserve something he couldn't quite understand. Maybe he meant well. Maybe he didn't. But the melody proves it doesn't matter. The song needs no museum. The clay remembers. A few weeks later, a different visitor arrives, a Cambodian archaeologist from Phnom Penh, wearing jeans and carrying an umbrella more symbolic than useful. She greets everyone in fluent Khmer, smiles easily, and sits cross-legged in the dirt beside the oldest potter as if they've known each other forever. The contrast is immediate and refreshing. She listens more than she talks. When she finally speaks, it's with gentle curiosity. "We're mapping kill sites along the river," she explains, trying to piece together the trade routes. "Your village's name appears in an inscription near Kampong Chnang." The potters blink at her. "Our name?" "Yes," she says, unrolling a tablet screen that glows faintly in the shade. It says something like, "The jars of this place are blessed by the flood and favored by kings." The master laughs, eyes shining. "Ah, so that's why my jars always crack evenly." Everyone laughs. Even the archaeologist. She takes notes, photographs the kill ruins, and records a few interviews, voices that tremble slightly when recalling ancestors, then steady when describing clay consistency. "Your hands hold knowledge that no book has," she says to the master. "If you let me, I'll write it down, but your way, not mine." Her promise feels different. Honest. You find yourself liking her immediately. That evening, she joins the meal, a simple spread of grilled fish and sticky rice, and asks about legends. "Any stories about pottery spirits?" she wonders. The master nods solemnly. "Of course. One lives under every kiln. If the potter forgets to thank it, the fire turns jealous." She grins. "I'll add that to the footnotes." It's a small moment, but it feels like balance. Foreign eyes, local hearts, both looking at the same clay with respect instead of hunger. Later, when she leaves, she gifts the master a small solar lantern. "So you can keep working after dark," she says. He laughs, turning it on and off like a magician testing new light. "Fire from the sun," he muses. "Even the river will be jealous." As her boat fades into the dusk, you realize something subtle has shifted. The world is watching this place again, but this time, perhaps, not to take, but to learn. And as you lie down by the kill's quiet shadow, the glow of the solar lamp flickering like a modern offering, you can almost hear the ancient jars hum their approval. By dawn, the sky above the Mekong stretches pale and wide, the color of unglazed clay before it meets the fire. Mist curls low over the water, folding and unfolding like the breath of something alive. The potters say this is when the river thinks, when it decides what to take, what to give back. You stand barefoot at the edge, your toes sinking into soft mud. Each ripple that brushes against your ankles feels like a whisper. The night's quiet has thickened into something almost holy, the kind of stillness that makes even birds hesitate before singing. And then, softly at first, the river begins to murmur again. The first boats push off, fishermen poling into the haze. The sound of oars dips and sighs, like the heartbeat of a creature too old to name. "The river forgets nothing," says the master, appearing beside you with his morning tea. "It remembers every flood, every pot that cracked before its time." He chuckles softly, and every fool who thought he could predict it. Historians still argue whether the rise and fall of the Khmer Empire was tied to these very floods, the temper of the tunnel sap and the Mekong's seasonal mood swings. Too much rain, and temples drowned. Too little, and kingdoms starved. Somewhere between, life bloomed and cracked in equal measure. Today, the river looks harmless. Almost gentle. You'd never guess it has swallowed entire towns. The potters, though, remember. They've built their kilns on raised mounds, their homes on stilts, their hope somewhere between practicality and prayer. The first rains come early that year. It starts with a few fat drops smacking the surface, each one sending rings racing outward like startled fish. The villagers glance up, not in alarm, but in recognition. "She's back," someone says. "The river has returned to her wilder self." You watch as the brown current begins to quicken, tugging playfully at the banks. A child runs out with a stick, trying to measure the rise. Too soon, an elder warns. Don't tease the flood before it's grown teeth. Within days, the rhythm of the village shifts. Pots are moved to higher shelves, clay stored beneath tarps. The great dragon kill's mouth is sealed, as if the villagers are whispering to it, "Rest, old friend." The season of drowning begins. One afternoon, you follow the master to the far field where the new clay pits lie. The pits have become small ponds now, slick and trembling. "This," he says, "is where the river eats our mistakes." Every year, she returns them. He scoops a handful of the thick, silty water. It glistens between his fingers like melted bronze. "The best clay comes after flood," he says. "When the river has chewed everything, sand, roots, memory, and spat out what she likes best." You crouch, mimicking him, and the mud clings to your hands, cool, alive. There's a strange pleasure in it, the same childish joy as pressing your palms into wet paint. He smiles knowingly. "Now you see why we never leave her," he says. That night, rain drums on the roofs like 1,000 impatient drummers. You fall asleep to its rhythm, half comforted, half uneasy. By morning, the river has grown teeth indeed. It gnaws at the banks, steals a corner of the garden, drags a bamboo fence downstream like a trophy. The villagers shrug and rebuild, as they always do. "We lend her what she asks for," they say. "She'll return it as clay later." There's a beauty in their resignation, a dance older than despair. At midday, you spot something odd bobbing near the shallows, a fragment of pottery, perfectly round at the rim, mottled with algae. You fish it out. The glaze, though worn, still shines faintly green under the sunlight. It looks suspiciously familiar. You carry it to the master, who laughs when he sees it. "Ah, one of mine, from years ago. Escaped during a flood." He turns it over, admiring the crack that spirals down its side. "See? The river forgave it. Sent it home." It's hard to tell if he's joking. His tone carries the same calm certainty as his craft, half faith, half habit. Days blur into weeks. The water keeps rising, inch by inch, until the lower paths disappear. Children paddle around in makeshift boats, old basins and hollowed logs. Life continues, damp but undeterred. The smell of wet earth fills everything. Then, one night, the rain stops as suddenly as it began. You wake to silence so deep it feels solid. The next morning, the world gleams, washed, new. The river has fattened, gliding past like a lazy serpent satisfied with its meal. Down by the bank, something extraordinary glints among the reeds. You wade closer. Pots, dozens of them, half buried in silt. Some intact, some broken, some fused together like melted sugar. The flood has unearthed an ancient cache, perhaps centuries old. You call for the others, and soon half the village gathers, kneeling in the mud. The archaeologist from Phnom Penh returns, eyes wide with disbelief. "These are pre-Angkorian," she murmurs, brushing off sediment. "Look at the rim patterns, they match the shards from Kompong Chnang." The master runs a finger along one jar's neck, smiling softly. "Maybe my ancestors," he says. "Maybe just good neighbors." No one claims the find. No one fences it off or calls for museums. Instead, the villagers clean what they can, then carry the jars to the temple and set them along the edge of the courtyard. Offerings of banana leaves and incense appear beside them, as if greeting old relatives who've wandered home after centuries. You realize something then: the river doesn't destroy history, it curates it. It hides things until humans are ready to remember. Later that evening, as you watch the sunset melt across the water, the master muses aloud. The river forgets nothing. She only waits for us to listen. He presses a small pot into your hands, newly made, still rough, not yet fired. Take this, he says, when you leave, so you'll remember how the earth breathes. You trace the shape with your thumb, feeling its softness. It's fragile, unfinished, and impossibly alive. As the light fades, the first frogs begin their chorus, deep and rhythmic. The flood recedes slowly, leaving behind more than mud. It leaves stories, loud, tangled, impossible to untell. The river, you understand, has no past or future. Only a patient, eternal present. Morning creeps into the village with the smell of rain-soaked wood and faint smoke from rekindled fires. You hear the soft creak of a potter's wheel turning somewhere, slow and steady like an old clock that refuses to stop ticking. The floodwaters have begun to recede, leaving behind damp footprints of silt across the paths, and the world feels both emptied and renewed. You follow the familiar sound, and there, under a slanting roof of woven palm, you find her. A small woman, older than anyone you've yet met here, her silver hair coiled in a bun, her eyes sharp and dark as obsidian. She's seated at the wheel, one bare foot pressing the pedal, her hands steady as they shape a lump of clay that seems barely willing to obey. This one is stubborn, she says without looking up. Her voice carries that thin, musical rasp of someone who's spent her life breathing kill smoke. You crouch beside her. The clay or the potter, you ask. Her lips twitch into a smile. At my age, there's no difference. This is Srey Ning, the last potter of Kampong Tralak, as the master introduced her. She's not officially the last, of course. But that's what people call her, because her hands remember things no one else does. Even the archaeologist from Phnom Penh treats her with quiet reverence, like a walking archive that could crumble if you raised your voice. You watch her work in silence. Her movements are so slow they seem meditative, each turn of the wheel a breath, each curve a sigh. The clay lengthens under her fingers, rising like something that wants to live. They tell me, she murmurs, young people don't want to do this anymore. Too dirty. Too slow. She shrugs. They'd rather sell phone cases. You ask why she keeps going. Her hands never stop moving. Because I still dream in clay, she says simply. Every night, I see pots spinning in my sleep. If I stop, maybe the dreams stop too. Outside, chickens cluck and a dog sneezes somewhere. The smell of damp earth seeps in, mixed with faint traces of burned rice husk. Everything about this moment feels suspended, fragile, like the wet rim of the bowl she's shaping. You notice her tools, a worn bamboo paddle, a stone smoother, a small gourd half filled with water. Each bears the patina of decades. You wonder how many thousands of times they've touched clay, how many vessels they've helped into being. She pauses to wipe her hands, then reaches for a shard sitting nearby, its glaze faintly green. This, she says, came from my mother's kill. Flood ticket. I found it again 10 years later, buried under a banana tree. The clay remembered the shape. Historians still argue whether Kampong Tralaka's pottery tradition originated from royal workshops or village improvisation. Srey Ning doesn't bother with such theories. The clay just wanted to be touched, she says, and someone had to say yes. Her laughter is dry and small, like crackling leaves. She invites you to sit, and before you can protest, she presses a lump of clay into your hands. Make something, she says. Doesn't matter what. You try. The clay collapses almost immediately, slumping like a tired jellyfish. She chuckles. Good. Now you understand humility. She reaches over, guides your hands. Her touch is gentle but decisive, correcting your fingers with the authority of a river teaching you how to flow. Under her guidance, the lump begins to rise again, slowly, reluctantly. You don't force it, she says. You listen. The clay tells you what it wants to be. There's something deeply human about the way she says it. You glance at her face, lined, calm, eyes half closed, and you realize she's not talking about pottery anymore. She finishes shaping her bowl, lifts it carefully off the wheel, and sets it aside to dry. My last one, she says softly. You blink. Your last. She nods. My hands ache. My breath gets short when the kiln smokes. I'll fire this one, and then I'll rest. You don't know what to say. The room feels suddenly heavier, filled with the slow weight of endings. She smiles faintly at your silence. Don't look so tragic, she says. Everything ends. Even rivers. But their beds stay. The next rain remembers the path. That evening, the village gathers at her kiln. The archaeologist, the master, the children, even the foreigner who'd returned weeks later with sketchbooks instead of contracts, they all come. The kiln glows with its soft, breathing fire. The old woman sits beside it, her hands resting on her knees, her eyes reflecting the flames. As the pots heat, the fire begins to sing, small cracks, hisses, the low hum of transformation. She closes her eyes and listens, smiling. The clay screams when it changes, she says. It's the sound of becoming. The others fall quiet. There's reverence in the air, but also an odd warmth, the kind you feel when something both ends and begins at once. Hours pass. The kiln finally cools. She opens it slowly, as though revealing a secret. Inside, her final bowl gleams, a deep, smoky red, smooth and perfect. She lifts it out, her hands trembling slightly. It's lighter than I expected, she says, surprised. Maybe it's ready to float away. The archaeologist bows. The master places a small garland beside the kiln. You stand nearby, unable to look away from the soft glow of that bowl. It's not just clay, it's every hand, every fire, every flood that came before. Sraining turns to you. When you go, she says, take the story, not the pot. The pot will break. The story won't. You promise. The next morning, her kiln is cold. She's gone, slipped away quietly in her sleep, as if she'd timed her life to cool with the fire. The villagers build a small altar beside the river, placing her last bowl there, half filled with water. When the wind stirs, it ripples faintly, reflecting the sky. She's part of the river now, the master says. The last potter, but not the last story. You stand beside the offering, the scent of incense curling upward, the river whispering its endless tune. The bowl catches the morning light and glows softly, like it remembers her touch. And perhaps, in some quiet way, it does. The kiln sits cold for weeks after Sraining's passing. The villagers move more quietly now, voices softened by absence. You still catch the faint smell of ash whenever the wind shifts, a ghost of heat that refuses to fade. The master often drifts toward the kiln without meaning to, standing before it as though it might suddenly breathe again. He doesn't speak much anymore, but when he does, it's always about her. She once made a pot so thin you could see candlelight through it, he says, half to himself. Life goes on, as it always does when something beloved ends. The rains withdraw, leaving cracked mud and the bright green of new shoots pushing through. A few younger villagers have taken to using plastic buckets instead of jars, lighter, cheaper, less likely to break. They still nod respectfully to the kiln when they pass, but they no longer stop to touch its bricks. You feel the change most in the silence. The once familiar rhythm of wheel and paddle has thinned to memory. Even the frogs sound uncertain at night, as if rehearsing in an empty theater. One morning, the archaeologist returns, her notebook now full and worn. She sits with the master beneath the tamarind tree, showing him photos of factories, rows of mechanical wheels spinning, each identical jar emerging flawless and lifeless. "It's efficient," she says quietly, "but I can't tell which hand made which." He studies the pictures for a long time, then closes the notebook gently. "If every pot looks the same," he says, "the river will get bored." She smiles sadly. "Maybe that's why we keep studying you. To remember what hands used to do." Historians still argue whether traditional crafts should adapt or resist the machine age. Some claim progress demands replication. Others believe survival lies in imperfection. But here, among the faded kilns and abandoned paddles, the debate feels distant, like a quarrel between clouds. You take long walks by the river in those days, watching the world around you shift. The old ferry has been replaced by a motorboat that coughs smoke like an asthmatic dragon. The markets downstream sell cheap ceramic plates imported from China, smooth, gleaming, without the faint irregularities that once made Khmer pottery so distinct. A vendor gestures proudly to their shine. "No crack, no stain," he says. You nod politely but feel an ache you can't quite name. Perfection, it seems, has a price: silence. Back in the village, a few of the younger potters have begun experimenting with modern kilns. Metal boxes with electric coils, more precise but less poetic. They work cleanly, efficiently, wearing gloves instead of clay-stained hands. When you ask them how it feels, one shrugs. "Easier," he says, "but less alive." That night, you sit by the old kiln with the master. The stars hang low, reflected faintly in the river's dark surface. He lights a small candle and sets it in the kiln's mouth. "Just so she won't feel cold," he murmurs. The flame dances inside the ash, and for a heartbeat you swear you see faces in the smoke. Srei Ning, the laughing apprentices, the nameless artisans of Angkor. All of them glowing, not gone. The master exhales slowly. "When I was young," he says, "I thought we worked for beauty. But really, we were keeping time. Each pot, a heartbeat." He taps his chest lightly. Now the rhythm's changing. Faster. Louder. Maybe that's fine. Maybe not. You both fall quiet, listening to the hum of distant engines on the river. The sound feels alien here, too mechanical, too restless. Yet, even as machines spread, there's resistance. A group of students from Phnom Penh arrives one afternoon, carrying sketchbooks and GoPros. They've come to learn the heritage process, they say. Their teacher bows deeply to the master and asks permission to document the craft. At first, the villagers watch them with suspicion. But soon laughter fills the air again as the students fumble with the wheels, clay splattering their jeans. The master's face softens. "Good," he says. "They'll remember the feeling, even if their hands forget." One evening, one of the students, a shy girl with ink-stained fingers, shows you her drawing. It's of Srei Ning's kiln, half overgrown with vines. But in her version, the vines bloom with tiny golden flowers. "I like to think it's sleeping," she says. "Not gone." You realize then that the craft isn't dying, it's evolving in whispers, finding refuge in art, in memory, in pixels. Clay gives way to code, but the impulse is the same: to shape, to hold, to preserve what slips through time's fingers. Still, the changes hurt. The dragon kilns crumble. The handmade jars vanish from markets, replaced by plastic smiles. Even the archaeologists' notes find their way into online archives, neat and bloodless. And yet, one afternoon, while wandering along a back alley in Phnom Penh, you spot something strange: a cafe built from reclaimed clay tiles, its sign written in looping Khmer script that reads Mekong Fire. Inside, mugs and bowls, hand-thrown, slightly uneven, line the shelves. The barista tells you, they are made upriver, by the old man from Kampong Tralak. He still works, slow but steady. You smile, the kind that starts deep in the chest. When you return months later, the master greets you with a nod. He's thinner, but his eyes still gleam with that stubborn warmth. Machines are fast, he says, but they can't drink tea from their own cups. He chuckles at his own joke. You laugh too, even though it's barely funny. He leads you behind his hut to a small, makeshift kiln, nothing grand, just a few bricks and a stubborn spark. The students helped me build it, he says. They wanted to learn how to fail properly. He pulls from it a small cup, still warm, still imperfect. The glaze runs unevenly, the rim dips slightly, and it's beautiful. She would have liked this, he says, meaning Sraining. You hold the cup, feeling its pulse, the faint vibration of cooling earth. Around you, the world hums with the noise of the present, yet here, in this small circle of light and clay, time moves differently. Perhaps the craft isn't dying after all. Perhaps it's just waiting for the noise to fade before speaking again. You look toward the river. It flows on, indifferent and eternal, carrying both plastic bottles and the memory of perfect, fragile pots. The sun slides low, painting everything in gold, the same color as the old glazes once used in royal temples. The master hands you another cup. For the road, he says. And remember, when you drink from it, don't rush. Clay hates hurry. You smile. So do I. And as you sip the tea, hot and earthy, the taste feels ancient, like the river itself has lent you its patience. Weeks pass, and the monsoon returns once more. You stand by the riverbank watching the familiar dance of water and mud begin again. The rain strikes the surface with soft, hypnotic rhythm, stirring up the same ochre silt that once clung to your hands when you shaped your first lump of clay here. It feels like the story has come full circle, only now, you can sense every heartbeat that came before it echoing faintly beneath your skin. The master has grown frail. His steps are smaller, slower, his laughter a rasp of wind. Yet when he lifts a jar from the fire, there's still that same calm authority in his motion, as if his bones remember the old tempo better than his mind does. You watch him run his thumb along the rim, checking for hidden cracks. Still alive, he murmurs. You can't tell if he means the jar or himself. In Phnom Penh, those cafe cups have become a quiet trend, small, uneven, but with a story in each curve. People say they feel human. Some influencers film themselves sipping espresso from them, talking about slow culture. You can't help but laugh softly. The old man would have liked the irony. It takes the digital world to make people miss dirt. Historians still argue whether revival movements like this are real preservation or just nostalgia with better lighting. Some claim these potters are ghosts clinging to sentimentality. Others see them as keepers of something the modern world has almost forgotten: rhythm, patience, imperfection. The truth, as always, drifts somewhere in between like a half-fired glaze, uncertain but luminous. The archaeologist sends you an email, a photo attached, an exhibit in Singapore displaying Khmer pottery beside QR codes and touchscreen panels. She writes, "Even here, they're listening to your river." You stare at the image for a long while, unsure whether to feel proud or sad. Maybe both. One afternoon, the master calls you to the kiln. "Time to open the last firing," he says. His hands tremble slightly as he pries open the bricks. Inside, a dozen small vessels glow faintly in the fading heat. You reach in carefully and lift one. The glaze shimmers like river water at dusk, rippling gold over clay the color of wet bark. "Beautiful," you whisper. He smiles faintly. "Not perfect," he corrects. And there it is, the heartbeat of the entire craft, resting in those two words. Not perfect, but true. He presses a palmful of dust into your hand. Clay always remembers where it came from, he says softly. When the river floods, it returns home. That night, rain batters the roofs again. You sit by the kiln, the glow of embers reflecting in your eyes. The master hums an old melody, half lullaby, half prayer. When dawn finally arrives, the sky opens in a thin veil of mist, and you realize you've dozed off beside the fire. The master is gone by then, slipped away quietly, like smoke leaving the kiln. You bury a handful of his ash by the river, right where the clay veins begin. As you press the soil back into place, it feels warm beneath your palms, as if grateful. You whisper, "Thank you." A few days later, you pack your bag. The kiln stands silent, vines starting to curl along its edges. Before you leave, you light one final candle inside its hollow, the same way he once did for Sreinin. Its small flame wavers, painting golden arcs on the ancient bricks. You turn toward the river, that eternal conveyor of memory, and begin to walk. Behind you, the kiln glows faintly through the mist, less like a ruin, more like a heartbeat. Somewhere downriver, someone will scoop a handful of mud, not knowing where it came from. They'll shape it, dry it, perhaps even fire it, and the cycle will begin anew. Clay, after all, never really dies. It just changes form, waiting for another hand to remember. You keep walking until the sound of the rain fades into the steady pulse of your own breath. The air smells of wet earth, of smoke, of quiet beginnings. You pause, just once, and look back. The river shimmers, smooth and endless, carrying the stories of those who shaped it and those yet to come. You smile. You've survived this after all. Barely, perhaps, but beautifully. The story softens now. The rain thins to a whisper, the river hums low and steady. You picture yourself drifting along that current, the boat rocking gently beneath the starlight. Every ripple carries the memory of fire, the scent of clay, the echo of laughter in some distant kiln. Your breathing slows. Each inhale tastes faintly of smoke and rain, each exhale leaves a trail of calm behind your ribs. The hands that once shaped clay now rest loosely at your sides, empty but full of everything they've touched. You think of the master's voice, rough, amused, endlessly patient. You remember the archaeologist's soft curiosity, the students' clay-smeared faces, the shy girl's sketch of blooming vines. All of them fragments of one long rhythm, like the soft thud of a potter's paddle tapping the edge of time. The river doesn't rush. It simply continues, carrying both yesterday and tomorrow in equal grace. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the steady wheel turning, the faint hiss of water meeting fire, the quiet sigh of a pot cooling in the dark. Everything slows. The light dims. Even your heartbeat begins to match the kiln's fading warmth, steady and kind. So let go now. Let the river keep moving. You've seen enough for tonight. Sleep, and dream of gentle hands and golden clay.